This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. I lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Welcome back to the Special Chronicles Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Smrokowski. Today, we are joined by author Nancy Goodfellow to talk about her heartfelt new novel, a story that celebrates friendship, inclusion, and the joy of being exactly who you are. We'll explore the journey of Madison and Meg, two junior high school students, navigating grief, growth, and the power of connection. Plus, we'll show how you can pre-order special starting October 29th. Stay tuned. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. Please put your virtual applause as we welcome Nancy Goodfellow back as a two-time guest. Welcome back, Nancy. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like I was talking over the audience applauding, but you know, that's how the podcast is. No, it's all.
I feel it.
Yeah, and hopefully, when the book comes out, we'll be at an event where we can actually hear and see a live audience.
That would be fantastic.
Yes, and if any of you are watching this or listening to this podcast this week or next week or whenever you listen to podcasts, whenever and wherever you listen, you can just reach out, feedback@specialchronicles.com if you all have an event that you would like us to be at. But Nancy, for those we were just talking about before we went live today, that the last time you and your daughter Lily were on was about a year ago. So
I believe so, yeah.
I think we have a lot of new listeners. So why don't you first, before we dive into the book, why don't you reintroduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us about your daughter Lily and just a little bit of your connection to our disability and Down syndrome community.
Okay, I'd love to. So my name is Nancy Goodfellow, and as you said, I have a daughter named Lily. And Lily was my first child. She was born with Down syndrome. We had a prenatal diagnosis that allowed us to prepare for her arrival. And shortly after she was born, I just kind of dedicated myself to being an advocate for not only her, but other people with disabilities. So over the past 22 years, I've been very involved as far as being not only an advocate, for her and other parents, but also trying to educate both adults and children about all intellectual disabilities. So I give presentations to schools, teaching kids about intellectual disabilities and how truly understanding what makes someone different allows you to then accept them, see past those differences, and see them as potential friends. And I also then, Lily's got a YouTube channel. So I've somehow found myself also being a YouTube producer and cue card holder and script writer and camera woman. So, but all in all, I'm also an author. And so I've always wanted to be a writer. And when Lily came along, I finally found something that was important to write about.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to dive into this new novel that for those of you listening, we'll let you know throughout and definitely at the end of how you all can pre-order this book that I, before going live today, I read the first 12 chapters, and so I'm going to try to finish it tonight and over the next couple of days. I don't always like to rush through novels,
right?
And so, but I at least wanted to have somewhat of a it's always how to, like, when you have an author on a podcast, you don't want to rush through the prep, but also at least, have somewhat of an idea, and which I do. Thanks to using some AI tools, able to get a good show together. So let's dive in, and based on your introduction and your daughter Lily, both your life experience with Lily, but then also your speaking life as well. What did both of those inspire you to write this book, Special, or what inspired you to write Special?
Yeah, so I think when Lily was born, like I said, I did a ton of research. I wanted to know everything I could about how to raise a child with Down syndrome. And so I read every book I could find. I went to every conference I could go to. And along the way, I came across a book that was about inclusion. And it talked about how to include kids with disabilities in the general education setting with other kids. And it talked about how when children are really young, so preschool, kindergarten, just starting out, they don't really notice differences so much. They just navigate to each other naturally as playmates. But as kids get older and the adults in the room start to notice who's maybe better with someone with a disability than others, they identify those kids and they start to seek them out as helpers. And so by third or fourth grade, you have teachers now asking, them to be partners for different school projects or at field trips, or just to be buddies walking in the halls together. And without meaning to, the adults turn those relationships that were just true friendships into jobs. And so instead of those kids seeing just their peer with a disability as one of their friends, now they see them as a responsibility. So that really stuck with me. And I kind of wanted to think about a story where I explored if kids had actually made it past that stage and just still remained friends, and what that would look like, especially when they got to a point where in, a part of their life like junior high, the changes that would come to the friendship would just be natural changes, would be from natural causes, like a new environment, making new friends, just trying to fit in. So I really wanted to kind of explore that story. And obviously, having Lily and all of the work I was doing as far as Down syndrome, it just made sense to have the character have Down syndrome and kind of go from there.
Awesome. In reading the first 12, I'll be honest to our listeners, the first 12 chapters.
Yep.
But don't, just listeners, I will be finishing the novel. But with that, you mentioned Special Olympics, and that's a movement like through the Special Olympics movement is how you and Lily and I all got connected, and how many of our listeners, not all, but many of our listeners get connected. And so you obviously mentioned Special Olympics in the novel, and that's in this book. Well, I can't. Okay, I can't talk about what I'm. Anyways, in something, can't misspeak. In some secret project that I'm working on, some secret project. I'm me and this other person that we're working on, we're debating on if we should even mention Special Olympics in this secret project. So with that, can you tell us, because it made me, when you mentioned partners, it made me kind of think of unified sports, unified leadership, where it's people with and without disabilities, whether it's on the playing field, whether it's with unified leadership, which is more like with companies. And so did the partners, did that play into like how did you come to put Special Olympics into this novel, and like did you kind of use some of that unified Peltno tomes in this fiction novel?
Yeah, I think Special Olympics is in the novel because it's a big part of like my life and Lily's life. And so it just seemed like a natural part of Meg, the character with Down syndrome, her life. Right. And there's so much of parts of the book that refer to Special Olympics. A lot of them are also flashing back to memories that Meg and Madison as friends, things that they did together, Madison being there to celebrate Meg and cheer her on when she's competing. And so I think it's just a natural part of growing up and like including those programs that people with disabilities can utilize. And I wanted to highlight those so that also people who don't have disabilities and children who will hopefully someday be reading this novel will recognize that as another opportunity to engage with their peers with disabilities. That Special Olympics is a really fun place to be, so I always say like Special Olympics basketball games are the most entertaining things you can go to. So
definitely. That's why I also play basketball too. And even like having everybody from Tim Shriver, chairman of Special Olympics International, and other people in the movement all talk about how this movement is all about having fun. And so it's good that you made that a part of the book. Did you show, like, whether it's we're both obviously in Illinois, in the Chicago area, so did you show anybody within our local Special Olympics program or anybody Special Olympics International the book to get permission to mention or to use? I think in some of the endorsements, one of the vice presidents of partnership that I also know, Kim Jordan. So whether it's Kim at SOI or at our local program, did anybody pre-read or give any feedback?
Yeah. So when I first started writing this book, Daniel, I was writing it only from the perspective of Madison, of a person who does not have a disability. And I was at a writing conference and I met an editor who said, "What about the other girl?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "What about Meg's story?" And I said, "Well, she has Down syndrome." And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, that's a really daunting task for me to like think that I could write from a first person perspective of someone with Down syndrome." And this editor looked at me and said, "If not you, who?" And he said, "Somebody, intimately, like your daughter has Down syndrome. And so you should be telling her story too." And so I didn't take that lightly. I wanted to make sure that, Meg is not a reflection of Lily. She's more of a combination of every individual with Down syndrome I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. And I wanted to make sure that if I was going to create this character, I was going to do so in the most authentic and realistic and respectful way possible. And so by doing that, I made sure that I had numerous readers along the way. So parents of other individuals with Down syndrome, special education teachers, people who worked for Special Olympics, speech therapists, social workers, all kinds of support staff that in schools who work with special education. I even had other, individuals with Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities read it. So I just wanted to make sure that before I ever put it out in the world, that it was, as respectful and realistic as I could possibly make it.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that you mentioned the realistic and authentic, because that's definitely, even though on the podcast, we don't have like a producing team that listens before it goes live. But with that, also from my insider's perspective in this community, we always try not to edit as much as we can. Sometimes it's not always possible. But we try to keep a lot of these podcast episodes authentic. So it's neat that you were able to have that authentic and realistic readers. Coming back to the book, how did you develop? You talked a little bit, but maybe go a little bit more in depth of how did you develop the characters of Madison, the character without Down syndrome, and then the as well as how did you develop the character of Meg, character with the Down syndrome, and then kind of tie that in with did your daughter Louie, as well as your other daughter, give any feedback to both since you have one daughter with Down syndrome and then one without,
right?
Did any of them read the novel and share any feedback from both of their perspective, even though the characters are a combination of a few different, but kind of maybe start with that personal of both of your two daughters, and then follow that up with how you develop both the characters of Madison and Meg.
Yeah, so I will say, like, the characters of Meg and Madison lived in my head for a really long time. So when I read the book about inclusion that, sparked this whole idea, Lily was still pretty little. And as the years went by, I found myself actually like having conversations in my head with these girls, and they were having conversations with each other. And I was getting to know them so well that I owed it to them to put them down on paper and tell their stories. Right. But I didn't want to even start writing until Lily was close to the age of the characters. So I wrote it when Lily was actually in middle school. So these characters are going into 7th grade, and I was writing it around that time when Lily was that age. So my youngest, Holly, is 4 years younger than Lily. So she was a little bit young for me to model any character off of, but there was definitely personality traits in both characters that I see in my girls. Madison, the relationship she has with Meg, she'll playfully tease her, and joke around with her. And that definitely is part of the relationship that both of my girls have with each other. And, there's definitely parts of Meg's character that come from Lily or were inspired by Lily, like the fact that Meg loves football and wants to wear a football jersey all the time. And that was Lily. I always joke that Lily would have worn an oversized football jersey to homecoming if I let her, So yeah, I think, but like I said, Meg is definitely a combination of every person I've ever met with Down syndrome. And there was parts of Madison that also were me growing up. And so it was easy for me to kind of pull from some of the things that I went through as a teenager and, wanting to change myself in order to fit in and, be included with the popular kids.
Awesome. In the message might be obvious when people start to read the novel, but and you mentioned, I think right before we went live, that it's a like a young reader type of a novel, but I'm sure anybody, like for those like myself, mid or late 30s, can probably it's been a long time since I've been that junior high age,
right,
or even high school age, that young reader. But hopefully I still look young. I don't know.
We both can we can get away with being much younger than we really are.
Yes. Maybe even with some AI.
Right.
And so, but with that, what message do you hope young readers will? Because I'm sure now, as you go out and speak, you use this novel as a tool in schools.
Yeah.
And so, what message do you hope? And hopefully, a lot of our listeners can get this novel in for their whether you're a parent listening or a teacher listening, or a school or even a library, you can get this into your schools and your communities. But what message do you hope young readers take away from the story?
Well, I think first I'll say, like as far as my presentations, it's always the same message, right? I'm going and I'm talking to kids because I want them to understand what makes people with disabilities different, why maybe a peer in their class behaves differently or learns differently. And I truly believe that if kids understand what makes those differences, what causes those differences, then they just see past them. Then it's like, oh, it's no big deal that, Johnny has to go leave the classroom for math because math's just harder for him, And so once they see past that, then they can just see those potential friendships. And so really, when I gave my presentations in the beginning, like I always wanted to draw from books and movies that the kids could relate to give those messages of acceptance and empathy. And when I looked, I couldn't find a middle grade novel so geared towards the ages of like 3rd to 8th grade, like those readers. And I couldn't find a novel that was about friendship that had a character with Down syndrome. And so I wanted to make sure I had that so that I could draw on it myself during presentations. So that was really why I wrote the book and had the kids, have it be the genre that it is as far as middle grade. And I personally love reading middle grade because I don't have time to invest in a really long book. So I love that I can pick up a middle grade novel and be thoroughly entertained and be done with it in a couple of days. So, so I think anybody would enjoy it. I think it's a great teaching tool. I'm hoping that it will be something that finds its way into classrooms and libraries and is used to help, teach kids empathy and acceptance and just bolster inclusion. I mean, I can tell you my mom's read it a couple of times and she just absolutely loves it. So an 87-year-old's interested too.
Awesome. So yeah, and even like that, I'm excited after we finish this live this live podcast right now to finish reading the novel, because it's I hope many of you that are watching or listening this, however you like to watch and listen podcasts, that you will follow the link or just go on to Nancy's website we'll try to make sure to put the link in the description below. I don't think it's there right now, but we will. After this live stream is done, we will put the link there. But hopefully you all will go and pre-order the book, because it's in addition to podcasts, but whether it's a podcast or a book or movie or TV show, all different. I'm sure that you agree. We need all different types of media, from books to podcasts, and everything in between, to reach young readers. I don't know if you want to comment briefly on that.
Yeah, I think that's, there's some really sad statistics that have been coming out lately about how few people read anymore. And I think back to when my kids were this age, and it was when the book Wonder by R.J. Palacio had come out. And, and that has since been made into a very popular movie. But Wonder inspired this whole movement of kids across not only grade school, but into junior high and high school, of choose kindness, right? And so I'm really hoping that Special encourages a choose special kind of movement, and ironically, I mean, you have to read the book, but special has more meaning than you think it has, and it's maybe not the obvious meaning. And so I hope that this is a book that then can be used across generations and platforms.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if there are any filmmakers that are listening to this podcast, or anybody that knows how to turn a novel into a book and a novel into a movement, hopefully, maybe this podcast episode will help to get your novel turned into, at least, if not a movie, at least into a choose special movement. Because just like you titled the novel Special Chronicles is also kind of off of, or I should say, inspired by Special Olympics. But the word special, yes, it's related to Special Olympics, but it, just like your novel, the word special is in the title of this podcast. It's in the title of this platform that's been going on for 17 years, for a reason, not just for people like Lily and myself, but for others without disabilities too.
Right.
Let's move into some of the themes of friendship and inclusion, which I think come to the forefront even within the first few chapters. I'm sure throughout the middle and into the novel as well. I will know.
It's okay, Daniel. Like we said, I'll come back when it's time for the actual publication date, and you'll have read it by then and can talk about the whole book.
And then, so
we don't want any spoilers now, anyways.
No, yeah, definitely for the host and for those of you that are watching. But by the time the book is published, I will have finished the novel. I might even have to reread it to refresh my memory. So with that, how does Special portray? Because it's like my girlfriend Georgia, who there's a poster in front of right behind the camera. I've got another picture in newspaper that's above the green screen of where I'm recording, and so we obviously know the importance of authentic friendships across differences, and so talk about related to the characters of Meg, the character with Down syndrome, and Madison, the character without. How does Special portray authentic friendships across differences?
I think, the girls become friends at the age of 5 playing kindergarten park district soccer. And I think authentic friendships are about having things in common, doing the same activities. And that's why inclusion is so important. Because if you don't have inclusion, then you don't have people with disabilities that are in those same spaces. But they were able to just start playing together and find the different things that they had in common. So in the story, Meg not only plays, park district soccer, but she's included in the general education classroom. She swims for the neighborhood swim team. And these were all things that I experienced with Lily. So I could draw from Lily's own experiences in order to create this friendship. And I actually dedicate the book to 3 girls that were Lily's best friends and continue to be her best friends. Like, that all inspired this friendship because I could picture it. I could imagine it because of the friendship that they each had with Lily at different times throughout their, elementary and junior high and high school careers. So I think, authentic friendships are friendship. Like, you're not friends with people that you have everything in common with. Nobody's the same. The world would be a very boring place if we were all exactly the same. But authentic friendships, you have people that are different than you, but you have, the things that you commonly enjoy, or you have common beliefs. And so I just wanted to create a story where also readers could see that. They could see that there was this authentic friendship between someone who did have a disability and someone who did not, and what that looked like.
Awesome. I love that. And the central character and that originally, I think at the beginning, at the top of the episode, you said that originally when you started writing, it was centered around the character without Down syndrome, Madison. But then after you went to that writers' conference, you changed it to Meg, the character with Down syndrome. So it might be obvious for those either that know you or now for those of you listening to this podcast with your daughter Lily. But why was it important to center a character with Down syndrome in this story as opposed to another intellectual disability or another disability? But why was it important to center a character with Down syndrome in this story?
I think, like I said, I think a lot of it was because when I do my presentations, I searched for a book that I could draw from, that had a character with Down syndrome. I talk a lot about different books in my presentations that have characters with autism. Those are easy to find, especially at this age grade, at the age that Special is centered for. But there just wasn't a story, a novel that was about friendship that had a character with Down syndrome. So I really wanted to have that out in the world. But as I said as well, I wouldn't feel comfortable creating a character from a first person perspective with a disability that I don't know intimately. And so I feel like because of my relationship with Lily, because of the work that I do, when I give my presentations, I'm joined by, our mutual friend, Michelle Anderson, who is a young woman with Down syndrome. And so she and I have spoken together for over 10 years. So it's those relationships that I feel like, okay, I'm qualified to write a character who has Down syndrome. And there are characters in the book who have various other disabilities, intellectual disabilities, autism and Fragile X. And so it was important for those to be authentic and realistic as well. And so I also talked to parents and had them read the book who, of their children who have Fragile X or who have autism.
Awesome. So building upon that, since you said that, you also talked with parents and people with other intellectual disabilities. So, as whether it's young readers or older readers, and so depending on what age the reader is, even though they're going to read and see in their mind a character with Down syndrome in the story, can they also relate it to another intellectual disability and find a friendship with another intellectual disability, even though it's the character is with Down syndrome? But can they relate to? Are they able to relate to other intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Absolutely. I think, empathy is something that needs to be taught, right? I don't think people realize that really empathy needs to be taught to kids. And when you teach them how to put themselves in someone else's shoes and to try to see the world from someone else's perspective, then that opens up a whole world of understanding and acceptance and inclusion. And so even though Meg has Down syndrome, I think that any reader would see the world through her eyes and realize that would be similar to anyone who's different in any way, right? So whether they have a learning disability, whether they have an intellectual disability, whether they have a physical disability, or whether they just have other differences, I think that, that will enable readers to look at any of those classmates differently.
Awesome. And so building on that, it's as if you have done a podcast before. I mean, not only this podcast, but you mentioned empathy, and so that's, I think, a powerful theme. In addition to the friendships across differences, but particularly that word empathy and that theme of empathy, in addition to friendship and inclusion. But what role does empathy play in the character's growth?
I think especially in Madison's growth, the empathy is huge because for her within the story, she has recently lost her father. So she's dealing with grief. She's starting a new school. She is trying to fit in. She gets to be one of the popular kids. And she's been looking at her friendship with Meg more recently as this kind of one-sided friendship where she was the one that was always supporting Meg. She was always there for Meg, helping her out. And as you see her grow throughout the novel, and as she makes these different realizations through her experiences, the biggest realization is she sees just how much Meg has done for her as a friend. And so she's able to kind of put herself in Meg's shoes for a bit, and see the friendship through Meg's eyes as far as what Meg has done for her. So I think that part of empathy for Madison helps her to grow. I think that the biggest importance of empathy in the book is what readers will get, is hopefully that ability for, because it's written in first person perspective and from both girls' perspectives, that a reader will see themselves in each story, in each girl, in a different way, and learn to empathize with them as well.
Awesome. I love that. And I'm going to jump a little bit around the show notes a little bit. Our listeners are not going to know that, but
now you've told them.
Yeah, now I told them. Only that's why sometimes I break down that fourth wall. And so I'm doing that because of how you just talked about the role of empathy. But in talking about that, you talked about how the character of Madison is dealing with grief. And so that's why, as we talk about this theme of grief and healing and emotional growth, and the growth that Madison goes on in dealing with the grief and healing throughout the novel in her friendship with Meg. Madison's grief is, as you talked about, as our listeners will tone into readers. Hopefully all of you listeners will to readers, is a powerful thread. So how did you approach writing Madison's journey and Madison's grief of this powerful thread? How did you approach the writing of her journey? Is it from personal experience?
When I said earlier that a lot of Madison came from me and my own experiences. I lost my dad when I was 2. So I was too young to have any memory of him. And I think when I was really young, I didn't even know that I was missing out on anything. So it never really affected me. And when I reached this age that the girls are at, that the characters are at, when I got into junior high, I started to really grieve the loss of my father and just missing out on that relationship between a father and a daughter. And I started to realize, what that meant and how that was going to affect my life. So I think writing Madison's grief over her own loss was actually kind of cathartic for me, years later to kind of write down the things that I was going through. So it was very easy for me to write Madison's grief and how she was feeling, and her, especially just, how much it would hit her when she'd see Meg interacting with her father. Because I remember that from when I was younger, as far as seeing friends and the relationship they had with their dads and realizing like that was pretty special and it wasn't something I had. So that was how I came to that, to be able to write that story. But I also felt like adults have a pretty important role when it comes to children with disabilities. I think you can relate to that, Daniel, and know just how important your parents are and how important they've been as you've gotten older. And so I've always had a much more prominent role in Lily's life and in her friendships than I ever did with my other kids. And so I think that was something that I knew also needed to be part of the story, that the parents did have a prominent role in the relationship between Madison and Meg. But, Madison comes to understand in the story that what she believed was things she did because of her dad, she actually just did with her dad's support, but it was because of her own choices.
Awesome. And building upon that and tying this healing in with the theme of friendship that we talked about at the top of the program today, how do friendships help Madison heal? Is there without spoiling any of the story to both, whether it's me, the host, who hasn't finished the novel yet, audience listening in, because we do want you all to pre-order, and so if you're watching this, we'll be putting the pre-order link in the description below, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. But with that, talk a little bit, whether it's a story from your personal life, whether it's a fictional story from Special, how do friendships help Madison heal?
I think, friendships help everybody heal, right? So all of us have experienced loss, and the support of family and friends is necessary in order to heal. And so I think that in the case of Special, Madison feels like she's alone in her grief. And it's when she finally realizes that Meg has lost a very important person in her life as well. And that Madison's dad, he was a prominent figure in Meg's life too. And so they can actually share their grief. And so I think when she realizes she's not alone, I think that's when she heals. And I think that's true for all of us, right? It's when you realize you're not alone in your grief, even if you have friends who maybe didn't experience the same grief or they're not going through it, they can still walk alongside you and still provide that kind of support.
Yeah, I love that. And those earlier this year, and I forgot exactly when it was, but there was a friend of my girlfriend, Georgia's, who I also know, and many within our Special Olympics community know this young man with Down syndrome, who I believe his name was Eddie, but and I don't know if he lived in, I think, Oak Park, and there was he had, and we were at this Opportunity Knocks, this other organization, their gala this past spring, and we both of us took pictures with them because we always see each other at this gala event and other events. But little did we know, this past summer when Georgia and I went on vacation, we got back and found out the news of him passing away, and so. And so I don't know if you know him as well, but I just that just made me think of, even within our intellectual disability community, just like the character of Madison, but also you talked about the character of Meg also having a loss. So that this was a personal loss that I thought kind of that our listeners can kind of also know
Right.
how to grieve and as well.
Yeah. And I didn't know Eddie. Yeah, I didn't know Eddie personally. I actually, years ago, I had mentioned earlier about how I kind of jumped into being an advocate and getting involved in the disability community when Lily was very young. And so for a number of years, I was on the board of directors of the National Association for Down Syndrome, and I worked as their editor, and I was a parent support volunteer, and I had a bunch of different roles before I was a public speaker. And so Eddie's mom was on the board with me. And so we knew each other then. And, we were both part of like the National Association for Down Syndrome fashion show every year and things like that. But I hadn't, seen them in, over 15 years or something like that. But so the name, though, as soon as I heard it, I remembered, and it's devastating. It's hard to, as a parent of a child with a disability, to just even try to understand that the emotion that comes with that kind of loss. Yeah. I think what's worth mentioning, Daniel, is how people with intellectual disabilities process things differently and can process those emotions differently, right? And so even though someone might not appear like they're grieving on the outside in a typical manner, they are still grieving on the inside and still trying to figure out what all of that means and how it affects them personally. And, there's fear involved as far as, well, if it could happen to him, then couldn't it happen to me? And, just, I think there's a lot to be learned from that experience, but also from the book and the way Meg processes her grief, and just that those things can look different as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm glad, and I'm sure our listeners will read throughout this novel and learn not just how somebody without Down syndrome, like the character Madison, but also readers and even people with Down syndrome will read this and see and hear how Meg is dealing with grief. So it's I think even more powerful that you're able to tell both of their stories. So no matter who the reader is, they can learn how to grieve and heal.
Well, and the other thing, Daniel, is like throughout the book, because there's been this rift in the relationship, right? The relationship is changing. That's the story, is that, this friendship is changing not only because Madison is grieving her father, but because the relationship changes, Meg's story and her growth is because she's grieving her friendship. She's grieving the loss of this friendship with Madison. And so the way she processes that grief and figures it out and tries to, learn how to get past it. But like those are all very, very real things to see as far as how she is dealing with that loss.
Awesome. I love that. Moving on, because I think we're about 49 minutes into the episode today. And so moving on, another topic, another theme is the school life and learning. And even though this is focused on characters and readers in junior high, but I'm sure whether it's like my 4-year-old niece and nephew and 2-year nephew who are in daycare and preschool, but also elementary school and high school and college. I'm sure all different types of school life can learn from this novel. Talk about what the challenges that Madison and Meg face in junior high.
So I think that the challenges they face in junior high are the same challenges any preteen faces in junior high. And it's that, wanting to make friends and wanting to fit in. Everybody just wants to belong. Everybody just wants to have friends. When I present to kids, I tell them that's the one thing you all have in common, right? Is every single person wants to have friends and just be accepted. And so they're facing those kind of pressures in junior high at a time when you're trying to figure out who you are at the same time. So you're pretty self-absorbed, for lack of a better way of saying it, but that's okay. Cause it's like, that's just the age that they're at. And so I think that the natural challenges of junior high are what they're facing, but then Meg is also facing those greater challenges of trying to navigate a new building, trying to navigate new classes, and getting to know new teachers, getting to know new students, but also trying to prove your worth and your ability at the same time. And so that's, it's very difficult for any child, but it's just that much harder for a child that has an intellectual disability.
Awesome. And building upon that first comment question that I asked about, even though this is about characters in junior high, can readers, whether it's, I'm sure my 4-year-old niece and 2-year nephew is not going to be necessarily reading. I'm sure we'll read to them. So can
right.
Whether it's people in, whether it's children in daycare or elementary school or high school or college, can you comment on those other types of school years? Can they still learn and apply what's happening to Madison and Meg in those school years?
Absolutely. So I think, like I said, the target age would be, students between like 3rd grade and 8th grade, as far as the target age of the readers. But high school students, college students, adults would all enjoy the book as well. And when you're speaking to like your niece and nephew, that would be it'd be a great book for the parents to read, so that as they get older, they can use the examples that there are provided from these girls' experiences and what they've learned from the parents' roles in this book, and then apply it to their own kids. Right. And so it's, kids, like I said, naturally gravitate towards each other as playmates and things. But I think the ones that really put in that extra effort are the ones who've been taught at home that they should accept everyone, regardless of disability, regardless of differences. And so it starts in the home. And so, so I hope that, not only would children read the book, but that parents would read it as well as an aid to inclusion.
Awesome. So I'm definitely going to pass on when you share with me and I share with the listeners, I'll definitely share the pre-order link with my sister. And for those of you listening or watching this podcast, follow the link, whether you're watching the video podcast and you see it on the screen. If you're watching the video podcast, you can also, at the top above where Nancy is, you see a QR code. If you scan that, it will go to the podcast page for this program. And you can find this episode. You can scan the QR code and find this episode to find the show notes for this episode, if that makes sense. Always trying to kind of, if TV is putting QR codes up, why don't we do that as well? If you're watching on your phone, then you might just want to watch this on your computer or TV, and then you can scan that QR code. But moving on, as you mentioned a little bit about real life, and even throughout our time together today, and building upon both your speaking career and also in this novel, how do classroom interactions reflect real-life inclusion?
I think, well, I can guarantee you that the story reflects real life because a lot of the experiences were based on real life experiences. So maybe not necessarily Lily's, but definitely experiences that I heard about as a parent support volunteer and talking to other parents. But some were based on Lily as well. And so I think what you see through the classroom interactions is that some kids are better at inclusion than others, right? And so some kids understand why there are individuals with disabilities in their classes, and maybe some don't. And those are the kids that just haven't learned empathy yet and haven't learned to understand those differences in order to see past them. And so there's different, I include scenes where Meg is included in the general education classroom. I include scenes where Meg is in a special education classroom, with fewer students and a special education teacher. And so I think that it provides a good example of maybe what those classrooms look like. You kind of get a glimpse behind the curtain of not only what some of the social interactions are between the kids, but also the interactions that happen between the teachers and the students. Awesome.
Building upon that real life inclusion that you talked about, and without spoiling too much for our listeners, without spoiling too much for the host who hasn't finished but will by hopefully the time you guys all by the time the book comes out. And can you share a favorite scene that shows peer support or teacher encouragement? It might be held without spoiling, but maybe you can share a favorite scene that shows peer support or teacher encouragement in the novel Special.
I think one of the most important scenes in regards to the school support in the school setting is when on the first day of school, Meg is trying to get back to her locker and get to class, and an older student stops her. And just because she has a disability, just because she has Down syndrome, he escorts her to the multi-needs or structured learning classroom, assuming that that's where she belongs. And he's not trying to hurt her feelings. He's not trying to be mean in any way. He's, honestly thinking that he's doing something right and that he's helping her, but he's making a mistake based on an assumption. And so I think that's a really powerful example of how you need to ask questions. And had he just said, "Where are you headed? Can I help you?" And she could have replied, "I'm headed to my locker. I know where I'm going." Instead of making the assumption that she belonged in a certain classroom in a certain part of the building. And so I think it highlights a really important lesson to be learned. And it draws on one of Lily's personal experiences, because on her first day of sixth grade, she walked into the classroom and into the building, and we had practiced how she got to her locker, how she got to her classes. We'd gone over and over and over, doing walkthroughs, in the weeks leading up to the first day of school. And she walked in, and the first teacher that saw her saw Down syndrome and immediately escorted her to another part of the building to the structured learning class. And Lily didn't know where she was and how to get back to her locker from there. So it was based on somebody who had good intentions, but really just needed to stop and ask questions first.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that walkthrough that you said, because even now, being in my late 30s, but many years since I've been Lily's age and the ages of Madison and Meg in school. But even whether you're their age or in your middle or late 30s, with an intellectual developmental disability, it's having those walkthroughs helps us, as you obviously know, with Lily. And so you're able to still take the walkthroughs that you have had in school to when you have a job. Like before I started my job at United Airlines, as you know, my mom and I did a walkthrough bus, like where we got on the Pace bus and then got off at the airport and walked all the way to the United Terminal 1, and then the same thing coming back. And so even though now the bus stop has since changed at the airport, but still having that walkthrough before helped.
Right.
Yeah. So moving on to social issues and advocacy. Before we get into the last part of promoting how our listeners can pre-order the book, but one last topic that it follows up your speaking career, but I think this novel also highlights a lot of social issues and advocacy that hopefully the readers will learn from the characters and then apply a lot of the social issues and the advocacy into their real life schools and even communities. And I'm sure even in families and in workplaces, hopefully they can still apply the same type of social issues and advocacy that when I was in school which was a couple decades ago, but
a couple years ago.
A couple years ago. Let's say that. A couple years ago. If you just listen to the audio podcast, you don't have to know how old I am.
Right.
Anyway, with that, in the workplace, there's still a lot of these social issues still relate, and still, like, even I had, without getting into details, in a workplace a few months ago, had a coworker who, as you know, those of us with intellectual disabilities are still a valuable part of the team. But there was a coworker who told me to basically at the airport, you know how when you board a flight, to stand where the passengers stand. So stand not as if you were part of the team. And so I'm not going to get into a lot of the details because it doesn't this conversation, but that's an example that really shouldn't happen. And so by advocating to my manager and supervisors, who I hope have done something, and there was another coworker that was even upset that it even happened, that this other guy had done it. So so that the advocacy is an important part of this novel. Special. How does Special address bullying and acceptance? It might be obvious when our listeners read and hear about Madison and Meg, but how does Special address bullying and acceptance? That's really, even without getting too political, because we don't really get that on the program, but
we don't want to open that can of worms.
Our listeners can probably imagine themselves, no matter what side you're on, can probably know what we're talking about. But how does Special address bullying and acceptance?
Well, so one way is that through a social group in the school with a social worker, Meg and her classmates, a couple of the other girls with disabilities, they learn to advocate for themselves. And the social worker actually uses the movie High School Musical to go through scenes and teach them different emotions, different face expressions, different intentions. And then different ways of advocating for themselves and sticking up for themselves. And so that is part of Meg's growth, is that by the end of the book, she has learned how to do that for herself. Whereas prior to that, she probably relied on Madison to do it for her. But the other part of bullying and things that I really wanted to kind of explore was the idea of typically developing peers, classmates who don't have disabilities, actually feeling jealousy for classmates who do. And it's something, that I see also in sibling relationships too, right? Someone with a disability may get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's a sibling who is jealous of the attention that they're not getting from their parents, or whether it's a, 7th grade girl who's jealous that, the person with Down syndrome is getting more attention from, the football players or other people in school than she's getting. So you have to read it to find out exactly who that is. but so I explore those things. I explore not only what some of the bullying might look like, but the reasons for why somebody might be doing that, and how they need to learn more about empathy and more about inclusion in order to avoid those things. But one of the things that, I really concentrate on in my presentations is also just the importance of not using hurtful words. And so that's something that's touched on in the book as well, is, just being very careful with the words that we use when we're referring to anyone with an intellectual disability, or when we're just using those words, sarcastically, even about ourselves. That it doesn't matter if someone's around to hear you or not, you just should never have that word in your vocabulary. So, I think that I address all of those things in the book, and hopefully then it'll just be a tool I can use in the presentations to really emphasize those points more.
Awesome. You mentioned not using hurtful language, and that made me think of, I know if anybody is familiar with Special Olympics movement or any other advocacy, you all probably know about the Spread the Word campaign. We've had on this program the two co-founders, Tim Shriver Jr. as well as Soren Palumbo, have both been on this program a few times. And so if you're listening, if you're watching the video podcast, you'll see it. I'll try to put a link in the description. But if you go to spreadtheword.global or follow at Pledge to Include on socials, you can learn more. But did you obviously know, I'm sure Louis' school has done Spread the Word campaign and activations. Can you comment on if the Spread the Word campaign plays a role in the story for Madison and Meg, or just whether you physically and visually wrote and mentioned the Spread the Word campaign, or if it was more of a knowing about it and then just kind of writing about it without saying it? Did any of the Spread the Word campaign play into the book special? Because I think it that was the first thing that came to my mind when we talk about acceptance and addressing bullying and social issues and advocacy. I wish we had that in Unified Champion schools when I was in school, but we didn't have it when I was growing up in school. But did this Spread the Word campaign play?
The Spread the Word campaign came in the sense that I've always been aware of it, and so like you mentioned Soren and his speech, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was something that I was introduced to just throughout my advocacy work. And so I remember reading his speech and being so moved by it. And so it definitely played into the role that hurtful words have in my presentations, and why I focus such a large part of it on that. Explaining to kids, like the true definition of the R word, how it originated as a medical term, and then became derogatory, and then has been replaced by other terms that, if things are said in the right tone, most things can be derogatory, right? And so whether they're meant to be or not. So I talk a lot about that with the kids, just for them to not only understand what words they shouldn't use, but also the tone of voice that they're using when they are talking and saying different words. So yeah, I think the Spread the Word campaign has always been something that's been in the back of my mind, in hoping that, other people become aware of it, but also knowing that whether you go, and actually pledge to spread the word, it's still something that everyone should know about. And, just inside themselves, they should be pledging to never use the word.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. We used to, even on the early days of this podcast, now we just have one long segment conversation interview with people. But in the early days of this podcast, I had a lot of different segments. An interview segment, I had different feedback segment, one a disability news segment, and I had one segment that was focused on Spread the Word, where I would highlight that campaign on the program. And I don't have any plans to go bring back any segments, just because it's time. It's easier just to have people on.
Right.
I guess why people want to tune in is hear from the guest. But definitely for those of you that either want to learn more, as well as learn how you can take a pledge, I didn't plan on mentioning this, but because it fits into this last topic here.
Yeah, absolutely.
You all see going across the screen, go to spreadtheworld.global, and or if you're on social media, pledge to include, you can click that link in bio. But just go to spreadtheworld.global, take the pledge, and learn more. Before we get to that final segment on pre-ordering, one kind of to wrap up this last topic, what conversations do you hope that this book sparks in schools and in families? We probably mentioned, I'm sure, a lot of what we talked about throughout the conversation today, whether it's social issues, grief, healing, emotional growth, school life and learning, themes of friendship and inclusion. I'm sure a lot of these, you probably hope a lot of these kind of fit into these conversations. But what conversations do you really hope that this book special sparks in schools, in families, not only in the Chicagoland area, but across the country, across the globe?
Oh, hopefully. Hopefully, right? I think when I give presentations, the most important part of my presentation is the questions and answers at the end, because it allows the children time to share their own comments or experiences. Oftentimes, it is a time for a child to raise their hand and say, I have that, and say what disability maybe they have, and their classmates look at them and think, really? I didn't know that, And so it's giving them that opportunity. But I love giving them the safe space to ask whatever questions they want to ask without being nervous that it's going to be the wrong question, or that it's going to be taken the wrong way, or that they're doing something wrong by asking that, right? And so that's what I hope. I hope that after reading this book, there are conversations in classrooms and conversations across the dinner table, and in the car, where kids can just say, well, what about this? And this person in my class, they do this sometimes, and it's really weird. And what about that? And, this person, they don't have to take the same tests I have to take. And why is that? And, all of those questions that kids are probably afraid to ask, but because they think they're going to get in trouble for asking them. But if you use good intentions and you ask respectfully, any question is okay. Even if you use the wrong words, sometimes it's okay. Like, as long as your intention is good, then it gives other people the opportunity to tell you, well, actually, we say this instead, and here's why. So I think that's what I hope is. I just hope for these opportunities to have these open and honest conversations without fear of being judged for whatever it is that they want to ask about. And it just all comes back to that. The more you understand something, the more you're willing to accept it, and then you can look past it.
Absolutely. I hope for many of you listening, when you go to pre-order and read this novel, that you will have those open, honest conversations. Hopefully, over the past 17 years, over 800 episodes of this program, over 100 episodes of the Georgia and Daniel show. Hopefully, this platform on Special Chronicles has sparked open and honest conversations, and I'm sure that this book Special will do the same. With that, it's now the point. I know we've been on for an hour and 16 minutes, and so it's about time to wrap up.
Too much fun.
Yeah, too much fun. Yeah. But the good thing about, unlike TV and radio, the good thing about these podcasts is these long form conversations that I think, if you're like me and you have a 2-hour commute home from work, it's like I was just telling my one of my cousins at my sister's wedding. I was sitting across the table from him, and I was saying, podcasts are great for the 2-hour commute. And actually, this cousin lives in Pennsylvania, and I was, a little fun fact, I was in the basement of his house, and he was the one that, because originally this podcast had a different name, and so he was the one I used the thesaurus to help to come up with Special Chronicles. I still have the thesaurus with me, bookmarked to like how I came up with the name with this name. But it was the cousin who, even though he's older than when, actually in my phone I've got a young picture of him. I should have taken an updated picture, but he was the cousin. It was in his basement in Pennsylvania, near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that he was the one that motivated me to rebrand this podcast and to the name that it is today, Special Chronicles. So
that's great.
My cousin, he was somebody without a disability who is motivated and encouraging me to not only keep up with this podcast, but really, if it wasn't for him, probably wouldn't have changed the name to what famous or probably not in fame, but like what everybody knows
is it infamous?
But, hopefully not. But to what everybody knows, it's thanks to my cousin. But
very well known.
Very well known, which I think that now it's somebody put that into my bio now. Well known.
Yeah, there you go.
But bringing it back to Special, we're going to put it up on the screen, but where and when because we're pre-recording this at the beginning of the week, and so if you are watching this October 27th, Monday, Tuesday the 28th, you might not be able to pre-order it just yet, but where can our listeners pre-order, and then follow it up with, are there any bonuses or events tied to the October 29th pre-order launch, as well as the March 21st World Down Syndrome publication?
Yeah, so I wanted the book to be coming out. I wanted the pre-launch to be in October. So we've made it by the skin of our teeth, but because it's Down Syndrome Awareness Month. So I really wanted to kind of use Down Syndrome Awareness Month to lead up to this announcement that Special would be out in the world and is available for pre-order. So my website, nancyfgoodfellow.com, that you have going across the bottom of the screen, thank you, will have links for where you can pre-order it. Basically, you'd be able to pre-order it from any local bookstore as well as Amazon. I am asking that anybody who's in the Chicagoland area, especially in the western suburbs, that they pre-order it from Anderson's bookstore in Naperville. I am hoping that by doing that, then we'll be able to have a really big World Down Syndrome Day party, and that will tie into the actual publication date of the book. So World Down Syndrome Day is on March 21st. It's 3/21 for the third copy of the 21st chromosome that causes Down syndrome. And so it's on a Saturday this year. So my actual publication date couldn't be on a Saturday. So it's actually on March 19th. But it means that everybody who pre-orders a copy will get their book on March 19th, and they'll have it in time for World Down Syndrome Day.
Awesome.
But I'm really hoping that we'll have some kind of a big party to tie into, the release of the book, and celebrate World Down Syndrome Day together. And then my dream is that I can go across the country and give presentations and do author events to highlight Special. But in doing so, contact and connect with local Down syndrome organizations who would then nominate a local young adult with Down syndrome to present with me and speak to their own experiences and what their life is like, just the same way that, our friend Michelle does when I present with her. So that's what I'm really hoping for. And yeah, so I can show you, this is the book. So this is my proof copy. It's got this band across the middle that I like. Special will be available for pre-order starting Wednesday and October 29th. And then it will be officially out in the world and on bookstore shelves March 19th of 2026.
Awesome. So with that, are you on? If our listeners go to nancyfgoodfellow.com, links to Amazon, to Anderson's book, like are you gonna have information whether it's online places like Amazon or hopefully in person at Anderson's bookstore to where and how people can pre-order?
Yeah, I'll have all the links to all the different stores to, support, especially independent bookstores. It's so important to support them, especially now. So as much as I wouldn't be upset with having high rankings on Amazon, from a bunch of pre-orders, I still, hope people will also support their local bookstores. So that's why Anderson's is my local bookstore in Naperville. So I would love to support them as much as possible. And like I said, hopefully we'll be able to, then partner with them to have a pretty great party for World Down Syndrome Day.
Awesome. Yeah. Hopefully we'll have to talk off air, but hopefully we can figure out how to do a live podcast conversation to help you with the launch. And maybe even get a few other voices like Michelle, like Lily, maybe my girlfriend Georgia, and other voices as well. We'll be sharing this episode with our listeners, so in our newsletter. So you all, if you're driving or listening or watching this and you don't have time to write it down, we'll put links to Nancy's website where you can get links to pre-order, hopefully from your independent bookstore.
The other thing too is if you follow me on Instagram at NF Goodfellow, I'm doing, a countdown right now to the pre-launch, just kind of telling people my story as far as how all of this came to be. But also I will sponsor giveaways over the next few months in advance of the release date and have some other fun announcements. So, so all of that will be available through there.
Awesome. And your social media links are on your website as well. So for those of you listening, go follow and find out how you can get some bonuses and other gifts from pre-ordering. How can a fan support your work beyond the book? You mentioned hopefully wanting to go across the country and maybe even we've got listeners in England and in New Zealand and Australia. And in other countries as well. So maybe even
everywhere. Have a book, we'll travel.
Yeah. So if there's a listener not only across the country but across the globe that's listening to the program that wants to have you come out and speak, how can listeners support your work beyond buying the book?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is like if you're a teacher or a paraprofessional or an administrator or a librarian, anybody who works with anybody in schools, or your parent, and you think that like my presentation would be valuable and helpful to have at your school, then please reach out and contact me. And I think that the more presentations I can do, the more I can get my book out there as well. And hopefully the more friendships I can encourage and inspire between kids, who don't have disabilities and kids who do.
Awesome. So we've got just a few minutes left. So these last two questions, we will go try to go very
speed round.
Yeah, speed round. So any final thoughts on your overall time now being a 2-time guest on the Special Chronicles podcast?
I'm just honored, Daniel. Thank you very much for having me. So I will come on as many times as you want me to.
Yeah, and I'm sure hopefully by the time the book comes out, you'll make your 3-time guest. Even Tim Shriver, chairman of Special Olympics, has only I think Tim has only have as a 2-time guest. So maybe come March 2026. You will beat our friend Tim. But maybe now Tim might want to find a way to come back. Anyway.
You know what? I'd be happy to come on with Tim. We can have a conversation together.
Yeah, because Tim has a history with education. So maybe we can, we will share this podcast with him, and we will find a way and see how we can, whether it's virtually or in person, to have you and Tim, because maybe Tim can read this book and we can have
I would love it.
Yeah. Awesome.
That'd be amazing because, like we said, Special Olympics plays a prominent role in the book. And I think it's beneficial for all children to learn about it as a movement and to get involved with it. So that'd be great.
So Tim, if you are listening to the program, get in touch, whether it's with Nancy or
the book.
Tim and everybody else get the book. Finally, we mentioned inclusion. It's a big part of the Special Olympics movement. It's a big part of Special Chronicles. My small team, content business manager, who's my dad, our volunteer content producer. Like this podcast wouldn't be possible without inclusion is even what makes this podcast possible. And so you and I, we all live it, and so we want our listeners to not only listen to us, but to have a call to action, just like you're having a call to action with your book Special. We want our listeners to have that and bring inclusion into their communities. So this final question will help our listeners do just that. And we've got it. Let's go ahead and roll that quick bumper and introduce the final question.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising.
Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference. Our demands are
equality,
dignity,
and the recognition of our shared humanity.
We will not stop or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
more divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution
is inclusion.
Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
So very quickly, relating to the a story in your novel Special, what, or maybe even related to Lily as well, but you can do both, related to the characters of Meg and Madison, but also to your daughter Lily and anybody else. What does inclusion mean to you?
It's a harder question than you think it would be, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so big.
It is.
But I think inclusion is truly having a place at the table, right? Like regardless of where you are, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's, at a friend's house, whether it's on the soccer team, whether it's on the swim team or just, hanging out at the pool. Inclusion means that everybody belongs regardless of differences. And so I think it's a world where you recognize that everybody has worth regardless of any ability or accomplishment. And so everybody's valuable. Everybody's special, right? So it's just inclusion in a perfect world is where everybody realizes that every single person belongs. Every single person has worth. Everybody wants to have friends and be part of it and just be accepted for who they are.
Awesome. Perfect way to wrap up our conversation today. Thank you again, Lily, for coming on now as a two-time guest. And thank you again for coming on for the past hour. I know it's been an hour and 30 minutes, but...
Oh, it was a pleasure, Daniel. It's always fun to talk to you.
Awesome. And so thank you, Nancy, for sharing the inspiration behind Special and reminding us why everyone matters. Listeners, pre-order your copy starting October 29th and help spread the message of empathy and inclusion. You can find this episode, a link to pre-order the book and more at specialchronicles.com/pod. That's specialchronicles.com/pod. Just look for this episode. And until next time, remember the world is a better place when we choose to include. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Chronicles Podcast. Our podcast was produced by Daniel Smrokowski on the Special Chronicles Network. Follow Special Chronicles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Subscribe, rate, and review Special Chronicles on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, specialchronicles.com, where you can stream our archives of over 500 episodes absolutely for free. Also, there's a list of our favorites, original series, award-winning columns, and blogs. And sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive bonus content delivered to your inbox. Again, specialchronicles.com. Special Chronicles is hosted by Podbean Podcast Hosting. Our live streams are powered by StreamYard. Thanks as always to our business manager, Adam Smrokowski, who always encourages us to never give up. I'm Daniel Smrokowski, back next week with more stories.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.